Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to the WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion with WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, historians, and editorial board. We first start with the pregame show where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. Let's first meet this week's panelists. Marc Kulkin, WeAreSC columnist who writes the Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball practice reports. Chris Arledge, former William Jewell College DB and team captain and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular column Musings with Arledge and is a graduate of the USC Law School. Erik McKinney, editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, as well as columnist, senior writer, nationally recognized recruiting analyst, and a USC graduate. Greg Katz, that's me, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes Fridays, The Obvious and Not So Obvious, and IMHO Sunday, and an active member of the Football Writers Association of America. Before we kick off this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news as of today's Monday afternoon's taping. Fresh off of Saturday's 41-28 Pac-12 victory over the Stanford Cardinal up in Palo Alto, the undefeated number 7 USC Trojans will host the Fresno State Bulldogs in the Coliseum this Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. That's Pacific time in a non-conference game, which will be nationally televised on Fox. And Trojans sophomore quarterback Caleb Williams was named Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week, and junior defensive lineman Tuli Tuipulotu was named the Pac-12 Defensive Lineman of the Week for their performances against Stanford. And before we jump into the first quarter, friends, WeAreSC remind you that Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership, and we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly valued, and it's free. And we also encourage you to check out WeAreSC.com, become a valued premium member of the best USC football and athletic news source around. And with that, let's kick it off. The first quarter panel, let's begin the first half kickoff with your overall thoughts on the Trojans' 41-28 victory at Stanford. Let's get overall letter grades for the offense and the overall comment. Marc Kulkin, let's go to you first. Give us an overall grade and assessment of the offense, and then we'll move on from there.
Sure. I'm going to go on the offense. You left out one category, and that's coaching. So I'm going to include that into my grade, even though we're not going to give it its own grade. So the overall offense gets a B, and it's partly because the coaching dragged it down a little bit in the second half. For 30 minutes, they were perfect on offense. I mean, what was that, Erik? You showed me the stat: 5 drives, 5 touchdowns. It's hard to beat that. So, yeah, overall, you give it a B just because they only played a one half really well. They had to settle for 6 points, 3 field goal attempts, making 2 of them. The players, at least one of them said they took their foot off the gas. Lincoln Riley said he needs to do better. So I think, winning 41-28 on the road is great, but let's kind of keep it real. There's still room to be improved. There's plenty of room for improvement.
Okay, Erik, let's move over to you. Your overall grade for the offense and some comments on it.
Yeah, I think B plus A minus, and I'm looking at that as kind of the overall. What did you produce against Stanford? If this is something where they punt on the 3rd drive and one of those touchdown drives is later and it's a little bit more spread out instead of, like Marc talked about, just so front heavy, where the first half is just absolute domination and the second half is kind of tripping on themselves a little bit, penalties and things that just didn't work. If it's more spread out and at the end of the day, you're looking at kind of over 500 total yards and 41 points, and you missed a field goal, and so maybe it's 44, and that kind of win, I think you're happier than what you end up with there. So again, there's places to go for the offense. It's not a solid A. It's not an A plus. It's not anything like that. Looked like it could have been early on, but I think there's a way to look at it like that. But I'm not gonna not going to fight too hard with Marc if you want to drag this grade down more just because of the way it played out, and you're ending that on a pretty significant thud, I think, on how that ended offensively.
All right, Chris, your take.
Yeah, I'll give them a B for the same reasons we've been talking about. That the first half was about as well as a football team can play offensively. And the reality is that's what you're going to see against everybody if USC is playing well in their focus, because there is no answer for this offense. The offensive line is all the national pundits wanted to talk bad about USC's offensive line for the season. We were all saying, I don't know, I think that group's going to be pretty good. They are pretty good. They're a pretty good group. The receivers are unbelievable. The running backs are very strong. Caleb Williams is a superstar. There's no answer to that offense. If you put 8 in the box, you can't possibly cover those receivers. If you don't put 8 in the box, they're going to run it down your throats. And if you do everything absolutely right, Caleb Williams will run and pick up 17 yards and a first down and do it again. So you can't stop the USC offense. Only they can stop them. And they did, because they lost focus in the second half of the game, which in the grand scheme of things is actually probably a really good thing, because that's going to give the coaches a lot of tape to deal with. It's going to give them something to scream about. And it's going to be potentially a wake-up call for that offense to realize that, yeah, if we're not on our game, people can stop us and we can get in trouble. So I think it's probably a good thing that we saw that, but I don't want to see it again. And I don't really want to see it against Stanford. I don't know that I hate Stanford the way Kevin Bruce does. But at the same time, I find David Shaw to be so smug that I really want to run it up on those guys every time. And if they could have scored 80, it would have been nice to score 80. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but I'll give them a B.
Well, I know John McKay would be pleased with your comments as he's watching down on all of us. He could never beat Stanford. There was no minimum points. He could beat them by 1,000 if he could do it. You all hit on the right points. I will just say this simplistically. It was an A in the first half. As far as I'm concerned with the offense, it was a C for the second half. That balances out to a B, and that's how I looked at it. You knew that, it's like the first half was like 4 home runs in a row, if you're to use another baseball analogy, and it was like some unnecessary strikeouts in the second half, but it happens. All right, let's get to some specific and attach a letter grade for each offensive unit and a brief comment. You can run down these yourselves. Marc, give us your quarterback, running backs, wide receiver, and I'm putting in tight ends with wide receivers to advance the cause a little bit, and your grade for offensive line, please.
Yeah. So quarterback A, 20, 27, 340 yards, 4 touchdowns. Pac-12 offensive player of the week, exclamation point. Running backs, I gave them an A. They turned out 160 plus net yards. Travis Dye, 27 yards right up the middle. I think they touched his towel as he went by for the touchdown. Wide receivers, tight ends. Look, if they stop slipping, Chris, you pointed this out at some point I read, that half of those incompletions were probably because the players fell down. So, look, A, there's too many superlatives you could put on this group, and you saw as the first touchdown went to a tight end. So Blake McCree, tight ends A. Offensive line, I agree with Chris. We've been talking about it. They're very good. They did give up 2 sacks, so we'll see how the depth is now, because it looks like they might have gotten dinged up a little bit. So we'll see how they continue. But offensive line, I'm going to go ahead and give them a B+, and I'll just ding them because of the 2 sacks.
Fair enough. Erik?
So Marc's got like a negative coaching grade there. If the overall offense gets a B and every single unit is A's across the board.
That play call in the second
he's
half.
He's very anti-Lincoln Riley, I think.
Yeah. Graham Harrell PTSD.
So I'm not going to quibble with Caleb Williams that, you look at the stats and kind of what he did, the plays he made. Yeah, if you get that from him every single game, I think you're going to be good. I don't know if it's a solid A for the running backs. I like what they do, but again, you can't just, if you're looking to sort of nitpick a little bit, Maybe there's some, more yards through contact and that sort of stuff for them. The wide receivers, Jordan Addison by himself is gonna raise that up, and probably every single game he plays. And you mentioned the field, and it should be mentioned. That was something where the second that I sat down in the press box, you looked out and there were just patches all over that field, and you could see, maybe like some dirt sprinkled in and trying to cover things up. But that got loose pretty early. Mario Williams, we counted 3 times, 4 times or something. He's going upfield and trying to cut outside and just ends up in a pile. I think he and Jordan Addison on the same play both went down once, just trying to make cuts. So yeah, that was tough for them. But again, when Jordan Addison, 7 catches, 172 yards, you see everything that group can do, right? Mario Williams catches a big ball downfield. Jordan Addison catches a big ball downfield. They both score touchdowns on balls that did not go, past the line of scrimmage on the throw. So I'm okay, A- for that group. Again, you got to play on the field that you're on, and you can't keep slipping. You got to figure out sort of how to handle that. Offensive line, yeah, I think it's probably a solid B+ there. There were a couple plays. Caleb Williams, he makes an offensive line look a lot better. I'm not going to say at all that the offensive line was not good, but he can turn sacks into positive plays as well as any quarterback in the country, I think. So I think a B+ there too. So yeah, along the same line, there were no groups dragging this thing down into a C range or anything like that. And I think every group would probably tell you, even Caleb Williams too, we can do better than that.
All right, Professor Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to give him B's across the board. I think that every position group could have played better. Caleb Williams in the second half, I think, lost focus as much as anybody else. He missed on those 2 deep passes badly. Both of those are probably touchdown throws if he just gets it anywhere in the neighborhood. He's great, but he can be better in the second half than he was. Running back, same. I don't have an issue with what the 2 older guys did. I think they're very good players. They are not Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison great though, right? Those guys can make things happen that very good players can't make happen because they're magic. Now I may include Mario Williams in that too. I don't think that Austin and
Travis Dye.
Yeah, Travis Dye. I don't think they're that kind of players. They're very solid players, good players. I think Rayleigh Brown could become that kind of player, but right now he still thinks that he's in high school and he can run out and he can just outrun everybody. And he had an opportunity to pick up a big first down and chose not to. And so I think that's a B. Wide receivers are spectacular. But if you're playing on a messy field, at some point you need to adjust. And I'm also giving the equipment staff a D because they didn't give them better cleats. Offensive line, also a B. A good group. They played well. When USC in the second half decided it was just going to run out the clock, they were not as dominant as you would want. They're picking up 2, 3, 4 yards a pop instead of 6, 7. So I think a B is about right for everybody. They can all play better. And if they play the way they did in the first half, there's nobody in the country that will beat this football team because you can't stop them if they play like that. But how often can you play perfect football? So that's my grade.
For 30 minutes.
So far, yes.
All right, I'm going to give it across the board B+ for everybody. I thought Caleb was obviously an A+ the first half. I think he had some issues to me in the second half. I thought he didn't make some good decisions on some, and that's probably being picky. But he is Caleb Williams, and you expect more out of him. I like the running backs. They run hard. They're smart. And I think that while they may not be, A+, they're good enough to be B+. Wide receivers, magnificent. I thought the one thing that stood out to me was Brendan Rice's offensive pass interference, and I would have called it on him too. I like the offensive line a lot, and you know what? We've come a long way in the last 2 years with this offensive group, and part of it is scheme, part of it is coaching, and I don't know. I looked at Bobby Haskins in there, and I focused in on him, and I thought he did a great job. And now that Cortland Ford's apparently a little banged up, I would suspect we're going to see even more of Haskins maybe on Saturday night. So that was my take on it. All right, let's turn to Alex Grinch's defense. Clearing your throats. Please begin with an overall letter grade for the defense and your comments. Marc Kulkin, what do you got for us? What overall grade?
Again, you know, you got 4 more takeaways. You're leading the country at a +8 right now. It's hard. Again, you don't want to drag the grade down, but we have to keep in mind that second half was, and the way they focused on the run game. I can only go B, and I'm tempted to go B-, but overall defensively, I'm going to give them a B. They went on the road, they won, and they covered. I know we don't like to do that, but hey, like 13-point cover is a good win on the road. Defensive line, rush-ins, you know, it's not the first time we've seen this type of RPO mesh. Oregon used to run this when Chip Kelly was up there, and Auburn showed how to defeat it. And it's just getting a good push up the middle and disrupting it. Well, there was none of that. So until this defensive line can improve, they were probably the weakest part of the defense. So I'm going to give him a C. Thule, it's hard when he's doing what he's doing, but defensive line, I'm giving a C+, only because Thule raises everybody around them better. Linebackers, I thought, were a solid B. They didn't hurt the team. I think you're starting to see CV Nomura make an impact. Eric Gentry is definitely in there. Secondary, Max Williams lifted that group. I'm going to go ahead and give them an A-. When you have an interception, a forced fumble, and then you've got another DB, Mekhi Blackman, doing the same over there. But Alex Grinch's secondary and Dante Williams, they're doing a good job with that group. And then special teams, I don't know, what do they do? Nothing? C+.
Let's stay on the sequence of questions here, just so we get out of order too much. But Erik, what overall grade did you give the defense, and any brief comments?
I think it's a C+, and a big part of that grade coming up are the 4 turnovers, because those were not turnovers, those were takeaways. And at a certain point, I think you can be good at getting takeaways. That is Eric Gentry in a passing lane that forces a really tough throw that gets bounced around, and Max Williams intercepts that ball. That is a great play from Mekhi Blackman to come up with interception. That is a absolute textbook teaching tape hit from Max Williams to force that fumble. And that is an absolutely devastating hit from Thule, running all the way to the sideline to chase down EJ Smith over there and force a fumble. And so you can't go too low, because those are 4 individually potentially game-changing plays. When you get 4 of those in one game, that's big for the defense. And I think that the grade against kind of the Stanford offense overall has to be a little bit on a curve. That slow mesh kind of came out of nowhere, and it's similar to what Oregon did, but almost the exact opposite. When you slow it down that much, it takes so much time, and the linebackers and safeties can mess up so much in that amount of time, where it gives the quarterback so much of an advantage on whether to hand it or whether to pull it and throw it. It is really tough. If that's being sprung upon you on game day, and now we got to figure out a plan, that is really difficult to do. And so I'm curious, another offense is not going to be able to, in a week, hey, let's put this in and let's run it as well as Stanford did, as when they've been running it for this long to kind of get ready for this game. So if USC doesn't see it again the rest of the year, then you kind of grade them on what Stanford did in their typical offense, which still isn't great. And Marc, you mentioned it, that defensive line had a tough time getting into the backfield and getting after the quarterback. If they sent guys kind of from different directions and came out of the peripheral vision of Tanner McKee and kind of messed him up a little bit, that's where some of the tackles for loss came and that sort of stuff. So again, I think kind of C+ just because they couldn't constantly control that line of scrimmage and get, and again, you kind of talk out of both sides of your mouth because you end up with 5 sacks and 12 tackles for loss. So how do you say there were no tackles for loss? I think it's a consistency thing, especially kind of in that first half to where you set the tone and play on the other side of that line. But again, I think there's improvement that could be seen from all levels of the defense. I think that the linebackers got put in a bind a lot just based on what that offense does to you. And so again, that kind of B-, C+ for the linebackers. I thought Erik Gentry was really good, ended up leading the team in tackles. And then the corners and safety, I thought a good game, a B from that secondary. There were some penalties, maybe a little more than half are kind of what you want to see in a game. Certainly not all of those thrown on them, but yeah, very interesting in terms of what do you actually take forward from this game, because what are you going to see again for if you're the USC defense? I know Alex Grinch said previously, and then Chris will go here, but he said if a play works against you, you've bought that play now for the rest of the year. I don't know if this kind of scheme and running that style of offense is something where all of a sudden Fresno State in 4 days can say, hey, let's throw this in and run this at USC.
Well, Chris, what do you say? What's your overall grade and a brief summation of the defense overall? Then we'll get to specifics.
So this is the strangest defense I've ever analyzed. I mean, 80% of the time, it looks like Monty Kiffin's defense out there. It's horrific. They get gashed with huge gains. You have defense backs getting a little bit grabby. We'll talk about that. They got screwed a little bit too. Yeah. But 80% of the time, it looks like a Monty Kiffin defense. And then 20% of the time, they're blowing plays up in spectacular fashion. The reality is, I'm going to give them a C, but this USC team will never lose a game where they have 12 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and 4 turnovers caused. They won't. The offense is so good that anytime the defense does that, they will win. And they'd beat Alabama if they did that. I don't know if they do that against Alabama's. Well, they might do it against Alabama's offense. I wasn't all that impressed by them either. So, yeah, I'll give them a C because most of the time they're terrible and some of the times they're great. And Erik is right. Last week I thought some of the turnovers were lucky breaks. Passes thrown behind receivers, balls popped up in the air, and you happen to be in the right spot. That was not the case this week. That was 4 legitimate takeaways, all of them excellent plays. You have all those tackles for loss, you have all those sacks, yet most of the time the defensive line can't win a one-on-one. I don't know what to make of it. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So I'll give individual grades in a minute. I think you wanted me to wait, but I'll give them an overall C.
Okay, and I'm going to say that I'm giving it a C too. I think there's a lot of concern on my part about the defense as not as a particular overall group, but there are definitely some specific things that cause me alarm that I think that Fresno State and definitely Oregon State will hammer on, and I think they have the ability to create a problem and a game. So let's move on from there. Like I said, I gave the defense a C. Let's get to some specifics. I know, Mark, you hit on some of them. We're going to do defensive line and rush ends together, linebackers and secondary. So 3 departments there. Is there anything you wanted to add, Mark?
No, Erik brought up, what Thule did, the 12 sacks, the 12 TFLs, the 5 sacks. When he caused that fumble, that might not even been his best play of the game. I think when he went Jefferson from Fast Times at Ridgemont High up the middle, that might have been his best play of the game. So maybe putting him over the nose of the ball, that might be an adjustment going forward. That's all I'll add for the defensive line as far as that. They need to get a lot better. But it goes to my point that you need a push up the middle to stop that type of offense.
What grade did you give the linebackers, Mark?
I'm going to go B- again because they were put in a bad situation a lot of the time.
And the secondary?
Oh, the secondary I gave a solid B+, just based on their production. Chris, you talked about the penalties that were called against them. Yeah, half of those were BS. So And then you want to go special teams now, or do you want
No,
to?
we'll keep that as second category. Let's move on with Erik. What grades did you give these three?
So,
Separate units?
what Marc did was fine. I think that's probably good. Probably C+ for the defensive line. I think there's kind of, we talked about a consistency thing there. You can't have somebody get washed all the way from one side of the formation across outside of the other tackle and then have the ball go to that spot where he was. I mean, I know there's a lot in that Alex Grinch defense where you're slanting and attacking different gaps and that kind of stuff, but it seemed like just too many instances of guys getting washed completely out of the play 10-15 yards past the ball. And then the linebackers, I think a B-. Again, that's a lot to deal with, and the negative plays, yeah, but I think they were doing well, right? They caused a few of those negative plays and that sort of thing. And then the secondary, I think a B+. I think people want to talk about Mekhi Blackman and the penalties and that sort of thing. If he plays like that every game, I think that's fine. If you're a corner and you get targeted as much as he did with a quarterback who's eventually a potential first-round NFL pick and big, physical, talented wide receivers, cornerbacks love that, right? Like that's why they play, is because you can go one-on-one and get targeted and all that kind of stuff. But you can't think that you're going to go 100% on that. I mean, you're not going to win every single one of those. You're going to have to play physical, and the way the Pac-12 is, they're going to throw flags. And I can only remember maybe one contested catch for a wide receiver against him, maybe two. So again, I think overall that's a B+ for the secondary, maybe even kind of moving up into A-.
Lincoln really wanted to call out the refs after the game. You could just see it. He was biting his lip. Called them what? Competitive calls by the.
There were a couple between that and the no offensive lineman getting downfield on that. You could see he wanted to maybe throw a red challenge flag out there.
Yeah.
All right. I'm curious with Chris, because you come from the defensive end of the football with some acumen there. So Chris, break it down for us, the three separate units. What did you see?
I'm going to give the defensive line a D+, and that's despite the fact that Thule was the conference player of the week. Because the truth is, they're not winning enough one-on-one battles. And I said it in my musings this week. Can you imagine Stanford running that offense where they're going to stand there at the mesh point for 2-3 seconds with Mike Patterson or Sean Cody or Cedric Ellis on the field? That game plan would have ended in humiliating fashion on the second series of the game. The reality is that the defensive line cannot make enough plays, and some of those guys are too easily blocked, and it puts the back seven in a terrible spot. I think this back seven is actually pretty darn good, and if the defensive line could hold up their end of the bargain, this defense would be pretty solid. But you can't run an RPO when they can stand there for 3 or 4 seconds and wait to see how you adjust, and the defensive lineman can't make a freaking play. And there are some guys on this defensive line that rush in spot that need to find a place on the bench. Corey Foreman is not a 5-star player. He's not a 4-star player. Right now, he's an invisible player, and they can't have that. If he needs to work on his technique, I don't know what he needs to work on. Whatever it is he needs to work on, he needs to work on it in practice and not on Saturdays. He is not making plays on the football field. So the reality is that group isn't very good right now. And if USC goes 10-2 instead of 12-0, that's the reason. It's not going to be because of Gentry and Shane Lee. It's not going to be because of Kalen Bullock and Mekhi Blackman. It's not going to be because of those guys. Those guys can play. It's going to be because the defensive line is not getting it done. So I'm going to give them a D+. The linebacker in the secondary, I'm going to give both groups a B+. I agree on Blackman. Some of those PI calls were silly, and I expect silliness from Pac-12 refs, but for crying out loud, this wasn't a situation where the guy is reaching up and pulling down arms. He's grabbing jersey and keeping the guy from getting out of his break. That's not what was going on most of the time. Blackman got targeted over and over and over again, and he gave up like 3 catches for 30-something yards. Even if you throw the 3, even if you give them 3 legitimate PIs, and I'm not sure there were 3 legitimate PIs, that's 11 targets for 73 yards and a pick. I'll take that every day of the week. Those guys, the guys in the back 7 can play. They really can. Defensive line's got to figure it out. And if they can't figure it out with the guys that are on the field, you got to put new guys in there. Maybe we need to see more Solo. Maybe we need to see more Bird. I don't know. But geez, I mean, you have way too many situations where there are just gigantic holes. Here's the thing too. So everybody's going to spread us out, right? When Stanford looked like the old Stanford, when they came in with 2 backs and tight ends, they didn't do much. It's when they spread us out. You can only afford to spread people out if your offensive line can handle those. If your offensive lineman can handle the defensive lineman one-on-ones, right? If you're winning the one-on-ones, you can spread it out. If you're not, you've got to keep backs and tight ends in to protect, right? But everybody can spread us out right now, because as long as you don't let Thule blow up your play, you're going to be fine. And that's just not good enough. So I don't know that there's an answer. I'm not sure that USC has the horses at those positions yet. And if you are, hey, if you're a defensive lineman on a mediocre team out there in America and you're looking for somewhere to play next year, transfer portal could be your best friend, because you could be in the playoff at USC. You get 2 or 3 of those guys that can wreak havoc, like Alex Grinch wants to do with his defense, and it changes everything. It changes everything. But it is what it is. So D+, B+, B+.
I want to say hi to Pat Narduzzi in the comments here coming through. Attack Chris for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to first of all, as far as what Stanford did with the mesh with the offense, they need to get credit for that. And I'm not going to be overly critical about for USC in not being able to handle it. You don't practice in a game, and they had no practice as this was going to happen. It reminded me back in 1970 when it might have been 71. I think it was 70 though. Alabama came out here, and SC had practiced against the I formation, and here comes Alabama, and they threw the wishbone, and SC didn't know what the hell to do with it, and they had so many problems that it created a situation for Alabama to really dominate the game. So I know that how difficult it was, and I was impressed first of all with the defense in the goal line. They did a great job. I think they deserve credit for that. But breaking it down for me, I give the defensive line and rush ends a D. Be honest with you, I think part of it is talent. You hate to pile on players. They're not professionals. They're not NFL players. But honestly speaking, Corey Foreman is, I don't know if he's a 5-star. I don't know if he's a 4-star either. I watched him. He's easily blocked. He seems to shy away from the contact. And I think that you wouldn't really pay all that much attention to him, but this is a guy they put on a billboard on the 110 freeway to say, we got this guy. And I would put him on the bench personally. I like Solomon Byrd. I thought he played with a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. I think Solomon Tuiapupu could be a real find. And I think at this point, they both deserve a shot to show what they can do. I don't think, I have concerns about Romello Height, not as a player, but I think with that shoulder, he had a problem coming in. Then he gets hurt. Now it's in a sling. It's the next thing we're going to hear, that he's having surgery, and we'll see him in the spring. But that's a concern. But right now, I hate to use the word sieve, but that's how I see the defensive line. And I tell you, I watch Fresno and Oregon State, and they are going to go right at it. That's part of their makeup, probably more so even for Oregon State. They will hammer at SC. And you know what? If you don't have a defensive line that's going to hold up, they're going to have SC's going to have a tough time in Corvallis. I gave the linebackers a B, the inside linebackers. I like Shane Lee. He really brought it on some of his hits. Obviously, Eric Gentry at his size is hard to throw over if you're a quarterback and when he drops. And I liked his play, and obviously he led the team in tackles, so credit to him. I had mixed feelings about the secondary. I don't have as much sympathy for Mekhi Blackman as maybe the panelists do. They're picking on him for a reason, because he's suspect, and they're going to continue to do it. And I thought he could have been called for more penalties, honestly, from what I saw. You know, they'll just have to adjust one way or the other. I thought some of the other players did play well, but I gave them a C plus. All right, let's move on to special teams. All we need is a grade and overall thought on it. Mark, grade and overall thought on the special teams.
B, as in boy.
Okay. Any comments you want to make that stood out to you about the special teams in particular?
Hopefully we don't punt more than twice a game.
Erik, you feel the same way?
No, that's a D. That's a muff punt that almost resulted in a turnover. That's a couple pretty long kickoff returns for Stanford. That's a missed field goal. No, there were some issues. That's I think a 29-yard punt. I like the last punt, you know, that pins them deep. But no, a lot of kind of shaky things for special teams there.
Chris, your thoughts on the special teams?
I'm with Erik. It's a D. That the special teams were bad, and the only reason it didn't matter is because it wasn't a particularly close game. But same problems he saw, I saw. I was not pleased, and we don't need a special teams coach experiment so far has not been a winner.
And I gave it a C minus. I agree with what you guys said. I do give Lynch credit for hitting 2 out of 3. So that's 66, so at 66 2/3 percentage. So yeah, they've got some work to do, and you hope it doesn't hurt them in a close game. And yes, I have a real concern about the punting at this point in time. So,
and by the way, Greg, you said a second ago, they're not professionals. I don't know that we can say that anymore. I think they are professionals. They are
Some of them.
Some of them. I agree with. I think it's Mark.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're all professionals. Some of them don't get paid very much. But the guys but they're all out there playing for money. I think they are professionals at this point. They're just college kids. They're amateurs. I'm going to hold my fire. No, they're not. These are kids out there competing. Some of them making millions of dollars a year. They're being handed cash. They're being handed all kinds of opportunities. Fair game.
By the way, since you brought it up, did you guys? Maybe you guys didn't. Maybe Chris saw it. The commercial with Caleb Williams for Action Drink. Did you see that one?
Yeah.
That tells you all you need to know where we're at today.
He's a professional.
He's a
damn good professional, by the way, but he's a professional.
For those who didn't see it, there was a 60-second commercial in the Fox between game highlight show. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you hear, "I'm Caleb Williams from USC," and they did a whole thing, a commercial on him. It was well done, I might add, of him pushing Action Drinks, but it was kind of a showstopper when you go, "Wow, we're seeing this." I expect Addison will be next with something, but you know, in deference to what you said, maybe the answer to helping some of these special teams, you pay the guys more. Maybe that should be the incentive. If you hold them to so much, we'll throw in a couple of bucks. So with that, let's move on to the second quarter. Let's take a look now at the Fresno State preview and get your thoughts. Let's first a little background. Fresno State is 1-1 on the year. They lost Saturday night, 35-32 to Oregon State. Oregon State's undefeated. The game was decided on the last play of the game after it appeared that Fresno State was going to win. Oregon State drove the ball down, and a gutsy call by Jonathan Smith. He used a wildcat formation 2 yards out, basically at the end of the game on the last play, and that was it. It could have easily been a win for Fresno State. Fresno State's coached by Jeff Tedford, now in his first season at FSU, but actually his second stint as the Bulldogs coach. Many USC fans will remember Tedford when he guided Cal to those sometimes epic battles with Pete Carroll's Trojans. Personnel-wise, Fresno State returns 15 starters, 7 players on offense, 7 players on defense, and its punter. The Trojans opened a 12-point favorite to defeat Fresno State in the Collie. Panel, your overall thoughts on Fresno State, and what must the Trojans do to conquer the Bulldogs in the Coliseum on Saturday night? Chris, forecast.
This is going to be a battle. Fresno State always gets up to play USC in the Coliseum. Every single player on that Fresno State roster wanted to play at USC and didn't get a chance. And these guys are good. Now, they are not USC good. They're not. And I'm going to talk in a second about how USC is going to struggle defensively against these guys for big chunks of the game. And I think that's true. But USC probably looks at it and says, we have some athletes on our side of the ball. I think we'll make some plays. If you're Fresno State's defensive coordinator, you're looking at this game saying, we're just going to pray and hopefully God will strike some of those guys dead, because if he doesn't, we don't have an answer. That's the reality. USC will score as many points as they want as long as they stay focused and disciplined. That's the reality, because USC has too much talent on the offensive side of the ball. So the question is, can Fresno State score 45 points and have a chance to win this game? And the answer may be like in 2005. Yeah, they can. They're going to have a shot, because Jeff Tedford is a good offensive coach. And while he's been known as a quarterback's guru, I think what Jeff Tedford has always done best is develop running backs in the running game. They're going to run the football at USC, and USC has not shown yet that they can stop it. The Trojans are better. They will probably win this game. But if you told me that the score is 31-31 going into the fourth quarter, I would not be shocked.
Marc Kulkin, would you be shocked?
I'll be extremely shocked if this game is close. So I am like 180 degrees from Chris on this one. So Fresno State is who they are. They had a chance to go up to Oregon last year and win on the road for all the reasons that Chris mentioned. You know, they run the ball, they throw the ball. Tedford wasn't their head coach last year, but they had a pretty solid offensive game plan. However, they turned the ball over significantly inside the red zone, and that's why they lost the game. Guess what's been happening against USC's defense this year? That is a recipe for disaster. The same thing happened to them at home against Oregon State. They drove to the Oregon State 25-yard line or closer 7 times, and they turned those trips into 2 touchdowns and a missed field goal, a 34-yarder. They also missed an extra point. So we're concerned about USC special teams. They've got a worse special teams. And again, to Chris's point, they're not going to be able to score with USC. So I don't see this game being close at all. As bad as USC's defense looks, they're opportunistic. If they're going to get 2 or 3 extra possessions, that's going to be the difference and separate the 2 teams.
Erik, do they have a chance, or is SC going to crush them like Marc thinks so?
I think it's in between those. I think this is a game that USC wins, and I think it's because, and Chris alluded to it too, this is the first time in a while that USC can roll 11 guys out on offense and just say you can't do anything about this, and we're going to score. It's reminiscent a little bit of those Oregon offenses where a team like Fresno State coming into this game could hang with USC, and every time it's like, hey, we just cut it to 11. We just scored and cut it to 9. We scored and cut it to 2 scores, and then USC runs down the length of the field, and now all of a sudden it's 17 or 18 and that sort of thing. And you can't score twice in a row to get close enough to really make it a game. Jake Haener, the quarterback for Fresno State, he's already talking about how excited he is for this game. And it's different for Fresno State to come to USC and play in the Coliseum than to play against even when they came to UCLA and won that game, it's different for them to come to USC. These, like Chris said, these guys grew up dreaming of playing at USC, and Haener said exactly that. I'm interested to see kind of what the run game is for them. This is a big kind of pass first team, but Jordan Mims is a good running back. I would expect Tedford to have all kinds of different misdirection and looks and that sort of stuff, and make this USC defense fill every gap all along the line of scrimmage and play gap sound, which they just have not done consistently. But I keep going back to that USC offense and just Fresno State not being able to go score for score with USC. And that's where I think USC has the advantage, because Fresno State, USC's offense is going to have more stars, more guys drafted, more NFL players than what Fresno State can offer defensively. It would take a absolutely kind of Herculean effort, or for turnovers to start kind of equaling out, and maybe some bad bounces to go against USC. But no, played straight up. USC finally, after a few years, has an offense where they can just roll it out there and go, because it's not, Caleb Williams is not forcing passes. Wide receivers are not making spectacular diving catches. Running backs are not making 4 guys miss in the backfield and then getting upfield. These are pretty easy, simple, well blocked, designed plays, and it just, USC's offense just rolls downhill at people, and I'd expect back home with some motivation to show that second half was not who they are. I'd expect that, but Fresno State's not going to roll over. I'll be shocked if USC runs away with it in the first quarter and Fresno State does not show up to play in this one.
Well, I've got a lot of respect for Fresno State. I have a lot of respect for Tedford. He's a proven winner. He's had great teams. I just can't forget when he had Lynch and he had Aaron Rodgers in the backfield, and what an incredible game that was in the Coliseum. I think 2006 or 2005. 4 was it 4? I when I watched them play, Haener to me is the real linchpin for them. He's not going to cower. I don't know whether they can knock him out of the game, because quite frankly, we didn't see much of a rush until the end of the Stanford game when Bird got a sack, and so did Tuipulotu. So I don't know if they're going to be able to handle it. I will say this: I hope SC doesn't go into the fourth quarter, with Fresno really in striking distance, because I think that Haener is a winner. The thing is, I know what SC's capable of doing on offense. I think we've all seen that. But I've also seen what they did in the second half against Stanford. They can't afford to do that against Fresno State. I'm not saying that they will do it. And maybe what happened is against Stanford, the second half is really a blessing in disguise. I think one of the great interesting facts of the game is I do think it's going to be, if not close to, it's going to be a sellout, and the red wave will come down from the Central Valley. And so there will be a significant fan support for the Bulldogs. I think it's going to make for a great college football game. And it'll be interesting to see how SC reacts to seeing a full Coliseum. I think they're going to like it, but it's going to be intense, and let's see how they actually hold up. So I think it's going to be not a wipeout myself. I think it's going to be a closer game. I think 12 points is probably accurate, but if it got closer than that, it wouldn't totally shock me, especially if SC doesn't put them away in the first half. So with that, let's get to halftime. National rankings this week. The Trojans are nationally ranked number 7 in the AP poll and number 8 in the coaches poll. Panel, let's talk about the AP poll here. Do you believe the Trojans are now overrated or underrated in the AP poll? And for those of you that have not seen the AP poll, just briefly, 1 is Georgia, 2 is Alabama, 3 is Ohio State, 4 is Michigan, 5 is Clemson, 6 is Oklahoma, 7 is USC, 8 is Oklahoma State, number 9 is Kentucky, and number 10 is Arkansas. Do you feel, Erik, McKinney, that this is an accurate placement for USC in the AP?
Yeah, that's fine. 7's fine. What I would like is if USC is still undefeated going into that Utah game, I'd like them to remove themselves from the polls and go in unranked for that. I do not need a Utah crowd that's already going to be unbelievably fired up to have a number 4 or 3 USC coming in there. But again, that's way down. For now, yeah, sure. The lower half of the top 10, if you wanted to put them at 9 or 6 or whatever, that's fine. So yeah, 7's great.
All right. What do you think, Chris?
I'm also fine with it. Look, it's not entirely clear to me that there are a lot of great football teams that don't have holes. I mean, Oklahoma hasn't looked spectacular. They really struggled offensively against a nobody this past week. Clemson can't do anything offensively, although their defense is pretty solid. I never trust Michigan's offense. And there's no way in the world I would think that Oklahoma State, Kentucky, or Arkansas should be ranked ahead of USC, because I think USC would hang 45 on all of them. So Am I fine with 7? Yeah. Could they be ahead of Oklahoma or Clemson or Michigan? Conceivably, and by the end of the season, they may be. The reality is, I'm not convinced that Alabama's that great. Alabama looked very mediocre at wide receiver and at offensive line against that Texas team. And if Texas quarterback doesn't get hurt, they'd probably lose that game. Frankly, if the Texas blitzing corner doesn't miss that sack, they probably lose that game. So I don't know. Other than Georgia, I don't know that anybody's been all that impressive. So I think that's fine. USC takes care of business, and they're going to be ranked very highly at the end of the year.
Mark, you agree with Chris's statements? You
Yeah,
like what SC is?
yeah, I mean, 7's great. I'll actually say they're underranked using the arguments that they made. Michigan and Clemson and Oklahoma, they're not going to be able to score with USC. That's just a matter of fact. So if you've got to gauge who's better than who, at some point, who's going to beat USC on the offensive side of the ball? You know, Nick Saban has already said defense doesn't win championships anymore, right, Chris? So, yeah, exactly. So let's just put it for what it is. You've got to have a dynamic offense and just get off. You have to have a good to serviceable defense to give you a couple of extra possessions. That's what Lincoln Riley has right now. So yeah, I would say USC right now, 2-0, based on what we've seen, based on what the evidence we've seen on those other teams, I'd go as high as number 4.
Wow.
They're better than Clemson. I'll give you right now. They're definitely better than Clemson.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Mark, because the Football Writers Association comes out with a weekly poll, and they actually have USC at number 5.
There you go.
Yeah, so I read why they believe that to be true. I like them. I like USC at number 7. I'll tell you why. Even though we know it really gets down to the college football playoff committee that's going to really get decide. Their rankings is the only one that really counts. But for the sake of enjoyment and argument, I find it amusing that SC is 7. And if you look at the teams above them, Georgia will probably play Alabama. Ohio State is going to play Michigan. Clemson will get their opportunity. Oklahoma, of course, will play Oklahoma State at some point.
Yeah, the Texas team that might beat them.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So it's really a line that as long as SC can keep winning, they're going to keep moving up eventually, because all these teams above them are going to play somebody that's capable of knocking them out. So it's going to be fascinating one way or the other. So we'll see what happens in week 3. It should be interesting. Now, before we start the second half, a reminder that you're watching or listening to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. This week's WeAreSC panelists, include Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Erik McKinney, and I'm your moderator, Greg Katz. We also encourage you to check out the WeAreSC.com website, part of the On3 network, and become a subscriber to the best coverage of USC football and recruiting and overall coverage of USC athletics. And as a reminder, WeAreSC is currently offering a 1-week free trial of WeAreSC.com, which includes breaking stories, analysis, recruiting, and data for USC football, basketball, and the balance of USC athletics. And with that, we turn to the third quarter. We kick off the second half and the third quarter with a new huddle format change. We think you're going to like it. Moving into the third quarter slot is the highly popular Musings with Arledge, with our beloved Chris Arage. A reminder that before Chris sinks his venomous jaws into the next victim, any comments or opinions expressed by Chris Arledge are solely those of his own and are not in any shape or form a reflection or opinions of WeAreSC.com or the On3 network. Any republication, rebroadcast, use, or other descriptions of Musing with Arledge without the express written consent of CNN and Fox News is strictly prohibited. And with that out of the way, now, ladies and gentlemen, the third quarter, we bring to you Inside the Trojans Huddle's version of Christopher Arledge's Musings with Arledge.
Thank you, Greg. I mentioned last week that when I was in London, I saw the musical Hamilton. There's a song in that show right after the Americans defeat the British at Yorktown, where the stunned British troops sing "The world turned upside down" because of the impossible had happened. the greatest military power on earth, had suffered a huge upset loss, and the world's largest empire was losing its most important piece. The great thing about college football is just how often the world gets turned upside down. In baseball, the best teams will lose 30 or even 40% of the time. Basketball, too. In the NFL, there's so much parity, you don't really see 20, 30, 40-point underdogs. And even the good teams are going to lose quite a few times. It's only in college football, when there is so much disparity between the programs and where a single loss can ruin an entire season, that you have regular season upsets that are so devastating and at the same time so glorious. 3 upsets made this past weekend a lot of fun. Let's start with famed giant killer Appalachian State, who took down number 6 Texas A&M in College Station. Now, gentlemen, we might question why Texas A&M was ever ranked number 6. This is a program that has every advantage: a huge dedicated fan base, a ton of money, some of the most fertile recruiting grounds in America. There's absolutely no reason this program shouldn't dominate, but they don't. They've had 1 season with double-digit wins in the last 23 years, the same number as the Kansas Jayhawks. That's embarrassing. And now A&M is the biggest source of inflation in America. It was A&M that went out and started this explosion of head coaching salaries when they nabbed Jimbo Fisher from Florida State right after Jimbo had gone 5-6. And he's everything they'd hoped he would be, if they hoped he would be a higher paid Kevin Sumlin. In fact, his record isn't even as good as Kevin Sumlin's. He's now known as the leading bag man in college football. He gives out lots of cash to recruits. Nick Saban, bewildered that 5-star recruits would voluntarily play at the most underachieving program in America, even called him out on it. Now, after taking his team full of 4- and 5-star recruits and losing to a team with a single 4-star recruit, Jimbo has Aggie fans excited for another 7 or 8 win season, which means the price of recruiting will now go up for everybody. Call it Jimbo-flation, because A&M will have to increase the size of the bags of cash it is passing out, and that's going to trickle down to every other program. And the Aggies don't really have a choice. I mean, at some point, asking high school players to put on the A&M uniform is like asking them to do porn. Even if the money's good, do you really want your family to see you doing that on TV? That being said, if you're a blue chip defensive player, knock yourself out. Take Jimbo's cash. Sure, you'll win 23 games over your 3 years there, but if you're big enough and fast enough, the NFL will still find you. But Jimbo, stop trying to offer money to guys like Malachi Nelson. Even Texas oil men don't have that kind of money. You haven't developed a quarterback since Jameis Winston, and I'm not sure you really developed him. Your quarterbacks are a mess. This year, last year, every year. You can't possibly pay Malachi Nelson enough money to throw away his NFL future. I looked it up. The top 5 picks in the NFL draft will sign rookie deals worth between $30 and $45 million. A 5th round pick, which is what a talented high school quarterback coached by you would have to look forward to, can expect a 4-year deal around $3 million. So unless you're offering an NIL package that is $30 to $40 million more than what Lincoln Riley can offer, just leave the poor kid alone. Haven't you ruined enough kids' futures at this point? Speaking of ruined futures, how's Marcus Freeman and the Irish doing? Now, I'm going to admit, I have a love-hate relationship with the Irish. I love the Notre Dame-USC rivalry. And so in many respects, it's better for USC if Notre Dame is good. But then I turn the game on, and I see the leprechaun, and I hear the music, and I just can't help myself. My emotions take over, and I want you guys to get embarrassed. Thank you for doing it again. Now, look, I know it's awkward, Irish, but I have a few questions. First, why are you playing that 14-year-old kid at quarterback? At least he looks like he's 14 in the picture, and he plays like he's 14. I'm pretty sure he couldn't start for any team in the Trinity League, not even Jay Sarah, so he may in fact be 14. Did you guys already run out of Ron Paulus, Jimmy Clausen type saviors? And Notre Dame, did you learn nothing from the Jerry Faust, Bob Davie, and Charlie Weiss situations? You go out and hire a young guy with no head coaching experience and just hope that everything will turn out okay. And here we are. 2 things. First, don't hire the guy the players want you to hire. We tried that. It's a disaster. They like the guy that hugs them and tells them they're warriors, but that's not what they need. And if you're going to go out and hire a guy who has no experience, make sure he at least hires coordinators who do. Pete Carroll, a defensive wizard with actual head coaching experience, went out and hired Norm Chow. And your guy goes out and hires some 20-something offensive coordinator who probably couldn't beat Clay Helton in checkers. What does that get you? The biggest disaster ever associated with Marshall football. Too early? It's been 52 years. Anyway, it's hard not to get excited about next week's Cal Notre Dame game. First 1 to 3 wins. This game is almost certain to end regulation in a scoreless tie. The teams will probably play 356 scoreless overtime periods over the course of 6 weeks just to see if somebody can score. This game won't be decided on the field so much as with supply lines. It will be a siege, a war of attrition. The team that can keep its players and coaches fed the longest is likely to win. Cal, don't make the same mistake Napoleon and Hitler made. It's going to get really cold by the time you're done there. Make sure you bring the winter uniforms. All right, fine, let's get to it. I was wrong. I even laughed at Mark and Greg when they said it might happen, but I'm not going to apologize. If you predict every single day that the world will end on the following day, you will eventually be right. It doesn't mean that the prediction is any less stupid. And I'm not going to apologize to Clay Helton either. We have too many data points on that guy for 1 week to change anything. Clay Helton is a -14 coach at home and a -21 coach on the road. Whatever the talent of the two teams is, Clay is worth 2 to 3 touchdowns for the other guys. He just is. What I didn't realize is Scott Frost is minus more. Do you realize how hard it is to lose to Clay Helton at home unless Clay has a massive talent advantage? Helton could coach a Pro Bowl roster to a 7-5 record. In the early days of American Idol, Simon Cowell became a star simply by telling these delusional kids the truth. He would tell them you should probably be doing something different with your life. So Trev Alberts did his best Simon Cowell impersonation and informed Scott Frost that Scott maybe should be doing something different with his life. And that seems fair. If you can't beat Clay Helton at home with a more talented roster, I'm not sure what you can do, but football ain't it. Nebraska even they were so desperate they paid an extra $7.5 million just to keep him from coaching for the next 2 weeks. Money well spent, probably. As for you, Clay, congrats. This win probably gives you an additional 2 seasons of delusional press conferences and disastrous underachievement. You should be employable through at least 2026 now. As for Georgia Southern fans, live it up. You're having your Penn State Rose Bowl moment. I remember it. Enjoy every second of it. I promise you, it's going to get much, much worse.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Chris. You touched all the bases. Texas A&M fans, remember the name Chris Arledge. Notre Dame fans, I think you're already familiar with that name, but once again, very, very well done. All right. So with that in mind, we're headed to the 4th quarter, but yes, we still have to light the Chris Arledge torch. I would hum to you the famous song of William Tell Overture, but I'm not a very good singer. So we're just going to have a little bit of a quick look at the.
Is it a moment of silence? Is that what we do now?
Well, I think probably all the fans of Texas A&M and Notre Dame are probably silent.
They've stopped paying attention to college football already.
All right. With that done, let us proceed into the final quarter with predictions in week 3 for Pac-12 teams. Now, in the interest of time, because some of the schools have to schedule ridiculous opponents, I figured we could all come to the conclusion that Oregon State, UCLA, ASU, and Arizona would be winners because UCLA is playing South Alabama, Oregon State is playing Montana State, ASU is playing Eastern Michigan, and Arizona is playing North Dakota State. They're all playing at home, so why discuss that when we can move on to more substantive games? So now with the games of substance, panel, give me your pick on the balance of the Pac-12 week 3 games with a brief comment if you wish. Let's start off with Cal 2-0 at Notre Dame 0-2. 0-2. 11:30 a.m. NBC. Notre Dame is a 12-point favorite. How do we feel about that, Chris? I think you kind of already told us, but what you're calling that?
Favorite. The over under on that game should be 4. No, look, I think Notre Dame probably wins, but it would not surprise me at all if Cal wins. Whoever wins is winning 6-3. That's going to be ugly and sloppy and embarrassing, and that's exactly what both of those programs deserve.
Mark, is it going to be all three of those things? What's your call on this game?
I think it's going to be that, but I think eventually Notre Dame's going to win sloppy, ugly, and embarrassingly by the point spread.
Erik?
Eventually they're going to have to break through this, right?
You think?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame wins because it's at Notre Dame. If this was at Cal, I think probably the other way.
And I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be Notre Dame because I just have a hard time believing that Cal can overcome the environment at Notre Dame. I can just say this, I will tune in the Notre Dame post-game show if Notre Dame loses to Cal, because I want to look at Marcus Freeman's face addressing the media on that one.
I don't know. Look, I don't know that you say the environment, and usually you're right, but right now I'm not convinced the environment's going to be hostile towards Cal. I think that environment's going to be hostile towards their own team.
Good point.
Well, if they're losing, I can guarantee you, you'll hear the boo birds. Definitely. All right, we got ranked BYU 2-0 at Oregon, 1-1, 12:30 p.m. Fox. Oregon's a 4-point favorite. How do you see it, Chris?
BYU's going to win, and I can't wait. Oregon is garbage. They're coached by guys who can't coach, and they have a quarterback who can't throw. BYU is tough and physical. They've been winning for a few years. They're going to come in confident. Cougars by 10. Enjoy it, America.
All right. Mark?
I'm not that confident, but yeah, I think BYU, they still own the Pac-12. So let them continue their march for dominance over this conference.
Erik?
Yeah, I think BYU had some wide receiver injury stuff last week. So, it's always interesting to see who's actually going to be available. We don't cover all these other teams, so there's ins and outs. But yeah, just looking at those two teams, I'd expect BYU to go in and run the ball at Oregon and win that game.
And I'm going to pick BYU as well. They seem to be on a real run against Pac-12 teams. And it just seems like the timing is right to go into Autzen Stadium and make the Ducks fly away. All right, we got Colorado at 0-2 at Minnesota, 2-0, 12:30 p.m. ESPN2. Minnesota is a whopping 27-point favorite. Chris?
I haven't watched Minnesota row the boat at all this year, but I know they're going to be Colorado. Colorado is garbage, a hot mess. They'll probably cover the 27 in the first half.
Mark?
Yeah. Colorado is like the number 14 team in this conference. They don't even register at number 12. That's how bad they are.
Erik, how bad are they?
Yeah, Minnesota's going to win that game twice.
And I will take Minnesota in a rout. I still can't believe that Colorado even hired Carl Dorrell when they did. I don't know what they were expecting, but I tell you what I'm expecting, that they'll be 0-3 after this weekend. All right, Colorado State 0-2 at surprising Washington State. Big upset winner at Wisconsin. Washington State is 2-0. This is a 2 p.m. Pac-12 network game. Washington State is a 16.5-point favorite. What say you, Chris?
Yeah, Washington State wins this game probably easily. I don't think Colorado State has much this year. And Washington State is not great offensively, but they're going to be fine Saturday.
Mark?
Yeah, they're uber confident right now coming home from Camp Randall. They're gonna ride that easily.
Erik, are you on that train?
Yeah, I think they win. There's also, there would be no better example of the Pac-12, right, than them beating Wisconsin on the road, coming home and just absolutely laying an egg and getting beat by Colorado State. I mean, I think Washington State wins. I think that's probably a sneaky team for USC to play. They do some things on defense that are a little bit annoying to play against. But gosh, that's a Pac-12 game. Colorado State beating Washington State, absolutely.
but it's
All
not
right,
after dark.
I'm taking Washington State. I like the enthusiasm they played with. I like the coaching. I liked everything that they did, and I watched it. And winning at Camp Randall Field is not an easy thing to do. So more power to the Cougars. Enjoy it in Pullman, and I hope you end up playing, getting undefeated when we get together with you guys in the future here. Okay, let's look at Michigan State 2-0 at Washington 2-0. This is a big game. 4:30 p.m. ABC. Washington is a 2-point favorite. Question is Washington legit? What do you think, Chris?
I don't trust them, and for the reasons that Erik gave. The Pac-10 usually falls all over themselves when they actually need to rise up and do something. I think Washington probably loses this game, but it'll be competitive and fun.
What say you, Mark?
I haven't seen enough of Washington. I've only seen clips, a little bit of game here and there. So they're at home. I'm going to go Sparty. I just don't feel Washington right now. I don't know if they turn that roster over enough to compete with Mel Tucker and what he's put together.
Erik, does Washington have a shot at this?
Sure. Yeah, I think Michigan State close probably in that one.
Okay, I'm going to take Michigan State. I think they're too established, and I know one thing: Husky Stadium will be crazy as long as they can stay in the game. So they have a puncher's chance to me with the. I know it's only a 2-point favorite, but it's going to be an interesting game, a fun game, I think, to watch. Okay, San Diego State 1-1 at Utah, which is 1-1. 7 p.m. ESPN2. Utah whopping 21-point favorite. What say you, Chris?
Utah has another loss in them before USC goes to Salt Lake, but it won't be this week. Utah big at home.
Mark?
Yeah. Utah big.
Okay, Erik?
Yeah.
Okay, I conclude it's going to be a wipeout. All right, here's the one you all been waiting for. Fresno State 1-1 at number 7 USC 2-0. 7:30 p.m. Fox SC 12.5 favorite at the moment. Chris?
So we talked about this already. Look, it wouldn't surprise me if Fresno State plays USC close. It also wouldn't surprise me if the Trojans blow them out. Tedford is usually a pro-style offense kind of guy. He likes his tight ends. He likes his two backs. If he comes in and plays that style against USC, he's going to get blown out. If he spreads the field against the Trojans, then SC is going to have a hard time protecting the weak defensive line, and they're going to make some plays. USC wins by 14 on the strength of a couple of turnovers and the fact that Fresno State has no solution to USC's offense.
Mark, you agree?
I agree that with what I said earlier, USC is going to win this game easily. 52-23.
All right, putting it right out there. Erik?
Yeah, I don't know if it's that much for me, but I think USC again takes control of it, and then Fresno State just can't catch up, and USC's offense does not look like what it looks like in the second half. They're playing at home and knowing that they've got to go 4 quarters here and can't let up. So yeah, SC by 17.
Okay, I think SC will win. I could see it a close game. I think Fresno State has a puncher's chance, and I've already gone over the reasons why. But it's going to be interesting. I think the key to me on this one is SC appears to be a physical team now. This is going to be a good stepping stone in preparation for Oregon State, which I know is a physical team. So with that in mind, we come to a very special feature by the unofficial Clay Helton fan club, where the panel predicts the weekly outcome of Gentleman Clay's Georgia Southern Eagles. As you know, last Saturday evening, Clay Helton and Georgia State upset Nebraska 45-42 in Lincoln, which on Sunday cost Nebraska coach Scott Frost his job.
And his dignity.
The undefeated Georgia Southern Eagles are now 2-0, and they're traveling to mighty Alabama Birmingham Blazers 1-1 this Saturday. For your information, UAB is a 12.5 favorite. Let's get some quick predictions here. And of course, we'll start with Mr. Marc Kulkin.
Yeah, peacock feathers ruffled all fanned out. This is where Clay Helton shows Georgia Southern why he is Clay Helton. Look, great individual. I would love for him to be my uncle, but he is going to get outcoached in this game, and they're going to come home 2-1. This is why you get geeked up, you see what could possibly be, and then something just thuds, and that's what you get. But the only person who's a worse coach than him, it's Scott Frost.
Well, I think Nebraska agrees with you. Chris, what's going to happen in this one? Is gentleman Clay going to be 3-0?
I wish we had a more significant research department, because I want to know if this is the first time that a team has beaten Nebraska in Lincoln and then been a 12.5 point underdog at UAB the following week. I think maybe it is. Clay Helton is who he is.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, something crazy will happen. And as Mark put it together, the gullible amongst us will get very excited. I am not gullible when it comes to Clay Helton. 12.5 is the over-under on first half penalties for Georgia Southern this week. They're going to get embarrassed. They're going to play lousy. Clay Helton will call his guys warriors and give them all hugs.
Erik?
I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about either of these programs. I do hope, I think that Clay Helton's coaching philosophy and style probably fits better with whatever the roster makeup is at Georgia Southern compared to what it was at USC. I hope he's there for 20 years and they do well, and that's just kind of his spot, and he kind of figures it out, and he doesn't end up back at USC. But yeah, in terms of the game, I'd imagine with those two teams, when you're at home favored by 12.5, as USC is, you take care of that.
All right. Well, we all know that Clay is never good for points and reaching the status of underdog or what have you. So I'm going with UAB. I feel a rout coming on, and we'll just have to wait and see. But it is interesting, and more power to Helton if he can somehow figure a way to do it. So with that in mind, let's get ready for overtime. We're in overtime. It's time to answer some viewer questions, panel answers in a free-for-all format. Folks, if you'd like to submit a question that we can answer or give you our opinions, just go to either the Gary P or WeAreSC members message boards at WeAreSC.com. From there, you'll see the topic thread regarding questions for Inside the Trojans Huddle. Let's go through some of these. I've kind of I tried to put questions that we haven't answered already. So if you don't hear your question, it's not that it wasn't a good question. It's that we've already given the answer. But let's start off from Corona Trojans fan in Vancouver, Washington, who was at the game at Stanford. The question is, was it my imagination that with 4 minutes to go and Stanford only down by 13 with 3 timeouts in hand, that Shaw basically looked like he was throwing in the towel by running the ball and trying short throws? I'll start off by saying I couldn't figure out why he was doing what he was doing. It did seem to me like he was already throwing in the towel. What do you guys think?
I think Shaw probably thought his best chance to get big chunk plays was to run the football. If you look at his quarterback's numbers, they weren't that great. He averaged 6 yards an attempt. He had one touchdown and 2 picks, and he had a passer rating around a QBR rating of 53. It's not like they were shredding USC, much less throwing downfield and shredding them. I think he probably figured they could get a couple of chunk plays on the ground. That wouldn't have shocked me at all if they had. Although that game wasn't in doubt. There was never a time when I thought, oh, Stanford may win this game. Never.
Yeah, I didn't get that question, Greg. I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared to answer it.
Okay. Did you think that Shaw basically threw in the towel near the end of the game, conserving his 3 timeouts and only trying short throws? What did you think? Do you think he basically gave up in the last couple of minutes, 3 minutes?
I think he didn't trust his players to make the plays. You can only count on the refs calling so many pass interference penalties, right? So I guess, yeah, he threw in the towel, sure.
Okay. This one's from Benji. Feel free to pick the question you think that you want. I think we answered a couple of them, but Benji says, as experts, would you use Jordan Addison, on punt returns? Also, was Coach Riley experimenting in the second half because of the comfortable lead, or did the defense suffer fatigue because of the larger Stanford lines? I think it's a mixed bag about using Addison back there. But if the kid's okay with it, I'm kind of okay with it, and it keeps him in the game. I don't know what Riley was doing in the second half. I think he got out of sync, and so did the team. So it was hard to get restarted again. Did I think that the defense suffered from fatigue? No, I do not think so.
I was thrown off by the start of his question. He said, as experts, and I'm wondered if he thought the composition of the panel would be different today. I don't have any problem with Jordan Addison running back punts. You don't need to do it all the time, but the guy's a game breaker and he's got sure hands, I think, although he almost screwed one up the other day. So I have no problem with it.
Anybody else gonna chime in on this question?
No, I'm good.
Okay, all right, let's move on. From HUD in SD. I don't know if that's San Diego or what the SD stands for, South Dakota. Which had the biggest influence on our front seven's inability to control the opponent's running game? Inadequate size strength, inadequate talent, or inadequate technique and scheme? I think we suffer from a talent standpoint. The scheme is what what Alex Grinch wants it to be. I don't think it is what he wants it to be. It's not totally doing what he wants it to be, but I think talent does have a lot to do with it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's part of it too that you're trying to adjust to that on the fly and figure that out in that game. But yeah, they don't have Georgia's defensive line, or even what we saw from Texas's defensive line. You don't have a bunch of big guys who can just pick up two offensive linemen and walk them back into the quarterback. And so if you're not doing that, and you're kind of slanting and getting out of gaps and trying to make those plays, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a bunch of tackles for loss. That's what the defense does. You want to get a big tackle for loss on first down, put the offense behind schedule, and then hopefully they don't convert a 2nd and 17. You can make a play on third down, and then boom, you've stolen a possession. But you're also going to give up big runs. I mean, it's going to happen. The idea that offenses are going to average 2 yards a play the rest of the season with no 30-yard runs or 40-yard runs, it's not going to happen. The big plays are coming from other offenses. You hope the defense can get enough turnovers, enough sacks, enough tackles for loss to steal those possessions here and there and put Caleb Williams back on the field.
Yeah, it's a talent problem. They don't have the big bodies that can dominate offensive linemen, nor do they have the Hercules. What was that guy's name at Washington State that played for
Manahafa?
Yeah, they don't have 240-pound guys that are so quick that they're beating people off their blocks either. They don't have either one of those things. I think what they're going to have to do to overcome it, to the extent they can, is they're going to have to load up the box, and they're going to have to leave the secondary guys one-on-one and just hope those guys can make plays. And if they do that, they'll make enough. The problem is I think teams are going to spread us out, so it's hard to put 8 guys in the box, and that's going to make it difficult to do that.
All right, how about from Scott in Gilbert, Arizona? Panel, if USC can stay healthy and get past Utah undefeated, with Georgia playing Alabama and Ohio State playing Michigan, is it actually possible that Lincoln Riley can take this team to the playoffs this year? While I think we're all tempering our expectations right now, if we're still undefeated on October 16th, I can't imagine the hype on this team won't be at fever pitch. I think if SC runs the table, they are in real good position this season to grab probably the number 4 spot, in my opinion.
If USC goes undefeated, they're not the number 4 team. They're 1 or 2.
I'm still looking for these questions on my script, so I'm trying to catch up to you guys.
If USC goes undefeated, beats Utah, maybe Utah again, or whatever team they get in the championship game, yeah, they're going to be 1 or 2 in the playoff. If they win the Pac-12 with 1 loss, I think that they're still in. USC is a name. People want to see them in the playoff. They're not going to get edged out by a one-loss Oklahoma State team, when you get time to the playoffs.
No, I agree with Erik. A one-loss USC team probably gets in, depending on who that loss is to and when it takes place. USC is exciting. They've got a coach that everybody's excited about. A one-loss USC team gets in, and USC has a chance to go through this schedule with one loss because they're going to score so many freaking points every week.
The one loss, if it's going to happen right now, look, Utah's still highly ranked. So regardless of how high USC climbs in the poll, Utah is probably going to be in the top 10 or hovering right around. So losing on the road to a top 10 team, Utah didn't fall very far losing to an unranked Florida team on the road. So why not give USC the same benefit of the doubt, right?
And then you can
Utah's going to lose at the Rose Bowl the week before they play USC.
Ooh,
that's my prediction.
Yeah. Ooh, man.
Yeah.
All right, from Ricky in New York City, if you are Jeff Tedford, how are you game planning to attack the SC defense and combat the offense? I don't think Jeff Tedford is, I don't think Jeff Tedford's going to change anything that he does. He might add a few things, but I think that he knows who he is. He knows who his players are. And at this point in the season, I think that rather than play this possession game, he's going to play the game that they play and let it play out. That's just my thoughts on it.
I hope he finds a red zone offense because so far it's not very good. I mean,
Jeff Tedford knows he needs to score in the 40s to have a chance to win this game. He is going to pull out all the stops. He's going to play aggressively. He's got nothing to lose. He's going to have a lot of misdirection. He's going to throw downfield. He's going to pull out all kinds of trick plays because he needs to get to 45 if he wants to have a chance.
Erik, did you want to add anything to this? Yeah, no, they'll run it. They'll test the USC defense, but he's going to let Jake Haener go. He's going to let Jake Haener throw the ball, run the ball, whatever he wants to do. He's going to put the ball in his hands.
You don't want to expose him too much, though. I mean, if you're going to have him running the ball, what's behind Jake Haener?
That's how you're going to win, though. Like if you want to win this game, you're going to let him do what he needs to do.
I agree with that. And finally, I thought this was an interesting question, actually. This is from Phil in East LA. As a graduate of Roosevelt High, here's a partial list of players who went on to play at SC. Mike Garrett, Tyrone Hudson, Lynn Kane, Ray Rodriguez. I believe he was a teammate of Kevin Bruce, and Joey Adewale. Which leads me to my question. Does USC recruit from LA cities anymore? I'll start off. My answer is wherever there's a great player, especially in Southern California, SC will be there, whether it's East LA or West LA. Panel, your thoughts?
Well, they'll recruit the city section if there were players to recruit, but all those players they're migrating to other programs. So it's not a matter of will they, it's a matter of why should they right now? Who can you give me a USC caliber player that you want from one of those city section schools? Can you name one?
Well, I tell you, if there was,
I mean, it's those schools are having a hard time recruiting kids themselves. I mean, putting enough players on the field to have a team. It's sad. You want guys to go there. You can have a whole debate about is what Mater Dei and Bosco doing to high school football good for high school football or the players or whatever. That's a debate that you can have. The reality is that it's happening, and they're stockpiling guys, and guys that should be at schools all over the place are ending up at primarily 2 schools in Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, look, the difference between what's happening in Southern California, what's happening in Texas, where I am, you can go to almost any of the big school games on Friday night, and you're going to see 1, 2, maybe 3 Division I recruits. And even the really good schools, Allen, for example, don't have the players that, I mean, Bosco came out here and just beat the tar out of Allen, just humiliated them. And Mater Dei would come out here and beat any of these teams and humiliate them too. So, yeah, I mean, you have a handful of schools, maybe you include Centennial in that, maybe include Sarah in that. You have a handful of schools that get all the great athletes. So that's where you're going to find your players.
All right. With that, a reminder again, if you have a question or comments for our panel, especially during this season, go to either the WeAreSC message boards and click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listening questions. So with that in mind, it's a wrap for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. A reminder that next Tuesday we'll review the Fresno State game as well as preview the Oregon State game and have our usual comments or relevant information about USC and college football topics in general, as well as selected predictions of games. So until then, a big thank you to this week's panel of Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Erik McKinney. A special thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Till next Tuesday, this is your host, Greg Katz, reminding you all to fight on, everybody.